Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Olga Bodie, and I'm a part of the team here at Syngap Research Fund. Our presentation today is about the SYNGAP1 Natural History Study and Multidisciplinary Clinic at Children's Hospital of Colorado. And I have the pleasure today to introduce Dr. Megan Abbott. Dr. Abbott is a pediatric epileptologist at Children's Hospital Colorado, embarking on a career in clinical research focused on outcome measures in developmental and epileptic encephalopathies, including SYNGAP1, and she aims to establish a new multidisciplinary clinic, generate gene-specific data sets, and devise outcome measures applicable to various DEE populations. Having grown up with a brother with special needs, she has both a personal and professional connection to working with rare disease families, and she's excited to begin this work in SYNGAP1 with the hope that we can advance towards clinical trials readiness in disease-modifying therapies. And also joining us today is Dr. Jillian McKee, who most of you are familiar with. And Dr. McKee is an epilepsy and neurogenetics fellow in the Division of Neurology at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. And a recorded version of this webinar will be available on the SRF website under webinars on the family menu. And by the end of this presentation, you'll have the opportunity to answer your questions. And we'd love to hear from you, but please write your questions in the Q&A below. So for those of you just joining us, welcome. And again, our speaker today is Dr. Megan Abbott from the Children's Hospital of Colorado. It's now my pleasure to turn things over to Dr. Abbott.
Hi, guys. I'm so excited to be here to talk about the new clinic we're setting up at Colorado in collaboration with CHAP. We're excited to be on this webinar together. And that was a very lengthy, very nice bio about me. I appreciate it. But in summary, I'm an epilepsy doc at Colorado who trained here, trained in neurogenetics, trained in epilepsy, and I'm just getting started as an attending. Have trained under Dr. Demrist, who set up multiple of these multidisciplinary clinics for other conditions, and just really excited that we're going to get to do this for SYNGAP1 and be able to talk about it with you guys today. So my aim is to talk about the clinic, how we do it at Colorado, the flow. We have our nurse coordinator joining us, Riley, so talk about how you get plugged into the clinic, and then we'll go through how we're going to collaborate with CHAP on the natural history study. And then at the end, if there's time, I'll talk through some of my clinical interests, which include clinical outcome measures we're going to use in the clinic, and cortical visual impairment, which is just my other kind of clinical interest, and go from there. There should be tons of time at the end for questions. So if you guys think of anything, please put them in the chat or bring them up at the end. I'm happy to talk through any questions about our clinic or how to get plugged in as we go. So just some background about multidisciplinary clinics at Colorado and what this is going to look like is that we have multiple neurogenetics multidisciplinary clinics at Colorado already, serving several conditions, including 8P, Ring 14, STXBP1, and SLC6A1 related disorders. And I'm setting up the SYNGAP1 clinic to be similar to these conditions clinics in the fact that we're going to have many providers who will rotate through seeing patients in our multidisciplinary clinic space. And it's hard to showcase on a PowerPoint and on a webinar what our multidisciplinary clinic space is like, but it is just a really amazing space that Children's Colorado has created that has really large rooms for patients and their families where you get to stay in the same room and providers all rotate through you. There's play spaces built into the clinic so that, you know, kids can get out of the room and get some of their energy out because we know it's hard to stay in a room through all these visits. And there's room for all the providers to be discussing patients as we go and at the beginning and the end. So there's a lot of collaboration, and it just is a really nice space to run these programs out of, and I think is one of the benefits of our facility. So providers that are going to be in the clinic include neurology, which will be myself, Rehab medicine, which also works with our therapy teams, so PT, OT, and speech. Genetics and a genetic counselor. The genetic counselor in the clinic is going to be Katie Angioni, who's also on this call. A special care pediatrician, who's a pediatrician that focuses on kids with special healthcare needs and goes through kind of all the organ and body systems during that visit. Developmental pediatrics or psychiatry. So depending on the day of clinic, it may be a developmental pediatrician or a psychiatrist, but we do plan on having somebody who can do behavioral modification and medication management in the clinic. And then neuropsychology. And our neuropsychologist is going to be Andrea Miele, who's amazing at doing assessments in these kids. She just really knows how to get through a full kind of battery of neuropsychological tests, which, as we know, can be challenging in these populations. And so I'll go through kind of what the clinic day looks like, but usually the full neuropsychological assessment takes several hours. And so that assessment's usually done either the day before or the day after our multidisciplinary clinic at Colorado. So our current clinic plan is to hold 2 clinics in August. So we have an August 12th clinic in the morning with 3 slots and an August 29th clinic in the morning with 3 slots. When I had checked with Riley, our nurse coordinator, yesterday, it sounded like we had 1 spot left in the August 12th clinic, and the August 29th clinic was full. The goal was to get these 2 clinics up and running, just to hopefully get to see some of your kiddos this summer before I go out on maternity leave in September. So I am pregnant with twins, and we'll be going on maternity leave at some point in September, with the goal of then restarting Syngap Multidisciplinary Clinic here in January. So we'll have a once-a-month clinic for Syngap with 3 slots a month beginning in January again. And there should be an opportunity for neuropsychology appointments either the day before or the day after. That's for both August clinics as well as the clinic that begins in January. And then special care pediatrician appointments as well. Sometimes those special care pediatrician appointments are built into the clinic, the multidisciplinary clinic itself, and sometimes you're seen in the afternoon when you were seen in the multidisciplinary clinic in the morning. So it just kind of depends on their schedule. And the hope and the goal is that this is the beginning of an extension of the SYNGAP1 natural history study at Colorado from CHOP that's already been going on over the past year at CHOP. And so from a timing perspective, how this usually works is the multidisciplinary clinic is a half day where patients, like I said, stay in the same room. For both these August clinics, that'll be in the morning. I don't know yet what day of the week and what timing looks like for the January clinics. But for both August 12th and August 29th, the multidisciplinary piece will be in the morning and providers will rotate through. So you'll see neurology and genetics together. You'll typically see PT, OT, speech, and the rehab medicine doctor together. And then you typically see our developmental pediatrician and our neuropsychologist as they rotate through the clinic as well. You'll then have a special care clinic appointment with our special care pediatrician, who is really great about going through kind of all the organ systems that can be affected by SYNGAP1. Including meeting with a special care dietitian to make sure that all of those needs are met, which is great. And then our neuropsychologist will do her assessments either the day prior or the day after. Great. I just wanted to give kind of a visual of what clinic can look like. So day prior to clinic, you can be seen, or day after, by our neuropsychologist. Then day of the multidisciplinary clinic, all these different disciplines will rotate through your clinic room and see you. We generally have a short list of recommendations at the end of that day from all these different specialists. And the goal is that all these specialists are providing recommendations that can then go back to your home team and inform care at your home institution. We think it's really important that you still kind of have a home doctor on the ground in case, you know, kids get sick, they need care right there where you guys live. But we're happy to be a resource for home providers if they need special recommendations for SYNGAP1, and can take back anything we say the day of clinic. It then takes a few weeks, but you'll also get all of our detailed notes from the day as well. So a lot of information for you guys and your home team comes out of the clinic. And then, like I said, you're seeing in our special care clinic as well with our special care pediatrician and pediatric focused dietitian. And you get recommendations from them as well that can go back to your home team. And I'm saying pediatrics a lot and kids, but we see patients of all ages. So I know, you know, some of your kids are over the age of 18, and we still absolutely see those patients in our multidisciplinary space. I'm going to give a plug here, and then I have her information again at the end of the talk. But Riley Vandenbroek is our nurse coordinator for this clinic and going to be the nurse coordinator for several of our other neurogenetic multidisciplinary clinics. She is amazing. She is our point person for getting people scheduled in the clinic, making sure people have all the information they need for the clinic day, and overall just the point person for the Syngap clinic at Colorado. So her email is there for the clinic. Pretty easy, syngapclinic@childrenscolorado.org, and a phone number for the clinic as well. Okay. And I wanted to get into how we're going to be collaborating with CHOP. I know a lot of you are familiar with the natural history study that's been started over the past year and are probably wondering how our clinic at Colorado fits in. And I think the good news is that Colorado and Philadelphia are very used to working together on a natural history study. So have been working together for over a year on the STXBP1 natural history study called STAR. And the aim is to do the same thing with SYNGAP. So we have, you know, collaborated before, we all know each other, we all work really well together and are used to running this protocol at both institutions, which I think is great. And this is an overview of the natural history study from CHAP that Jillian gave me, and I'm going to talk through it, but if she has anything to add, she's going to jump in. So we can see that there's day of appointment clinical evaluations that we're doing from an outcome measure perspective. It's a lot of scales that therapists run to measure gross motor, fine motor, speech development, behavior. So lots of scales that we're seeing, do these work in SYNGAP? And are we measuring, you know, what your patients can do appropriately? And then there's going to be in the future caregiver surveys that are also sent out prior to your appointments, where we're looking at what you guys think at home from quality of life standpoint, behavior standpoint. These are all these scales here. Seizure diaries, those kinds of things. And so the aim is to be sending those out before clinic as well. And we have very similar providers who rotate through both clinics. So neuro, therapy evaluations, you know, a behavioral type of evaluation, developmental peds or psychiatry is the goal. Having all those different providers be part of the clinic is true at both sites. And then the QEEG piece, we're still figuring out at Colorado. So hopefully in the future, there's the potential to be doing QEEG analysis on patients here as well. That won't be done for the August clinics, but the hope is that we figure it out by the time we relaunch in January. These are just an example of some of the caregiver surveys that we plan to send out. And the overall goal, like this looks like a lot of surveys, right? You're like, that seems like a lot of things to fill out. But the hope is that we're figuring out what measures work in SYNGAP1 so that we can then use those in future clinical trials. So everything we're doing is aimed at how do we measure SYNGAP1 appropriately so that in the future, when a clinical trial becomes available, we know how to measure if things work or not. And so that's why we're testing all these different things as part of the study, the natural history study. Same thing goes for clinician evaluations. And then the goal is to analyze kind of all these data points that we're collecting, including, seizure information, developmental outcomes, all of those things that we measured in the clinic, and see what we get at the end. Jillian, do you have anything to add in terms of the protocol at CHOP or how things might be similar or different?
No, I think you covered it. I guess one difference is that it sounds like your study is split over 2 days usually for the most part, whereas we typically have patients come for one quite long day at a time. But the assessments are generally similar, and hopefully we'll get you guys up and running with the QEEG too, so then we can share all of that data together.
Yeah, and the goal is the data is going to be, flowing between the centers. So just because you come to Colorado, we should be kind of collaborating and collecting data in similar ways, so that everything's feeding into the natural history study at the end. So it shouldn't matter from a research perspective what site you go to. And then I just wanted to talk a little bit about my research interest in outcome measures. And one of the outcomes we're going to be looking at in SYNGAP1 is a clinician clinical severity assessment and parent clinical severity assessment. So this will be one of the things that we're doing in clinic as the neurologist. I'm going to be measuring this. It's started out as a CDKL5 outcome measure. So our team here designed and validated these outcome measures in CDKL5, which is another kind of severe developmental and epilepsy genetic condition. And my goal is to take that outcome measure that was designed for CDKL5 and see if it can work for other neurogenetic conditions like SYNGAP1. And so the outcome measure involves measuring different domains, and I will show, I'm actually going to skip ahead to show the different domains. The clinical severity assessment from both a clinician and a caregiver reported measures different domains that would be important in SYNGAP1. So motor, communication, vision from a clinician perspective. And then from the caregiver survey you would be sent is autonomic, seizures, alertness, and behavior, all things that we know can be impacted in SYNGAP1. Because my overall hope and vision is that we find an outcome measure that really can showcase the entirety of what your patients look like and not just be measuring one thing. At the moment, clinical trials are really pigeonholed on measuring kind of either just seizure frequency or one aspect of motor development. And the hope is that we're going to be measuring more things so that we can see if a new therapy, a new, gene therapy, novel therapy, medication really works at improving any of these things for SYNGAP1. And so we've done this, we've taken the measure, the clinical severity assessment, and started to measure it in some of our populations that we're seeing here in our multidisciplinary clinic. And we do see that it can capture a range of abilities and a range of severity. The higher your score, the more severe we think your functioning is. And so you can see here that based on the condition, there can be a range of severity that we're seeing based on the overall score. That's true for both the clinician and the caregiver. And the plan is to start recording these measures for SYNGAP1 as well as part of the clinic. And then my other interest that I hope can bring value to you guys coming to the clinic is evaluating for cortical visual impairment. Just over the past few years being involved in these clinics, we've really found that it's been hard for patients to get a diagnosis of cortical visual impairment if they have it. And getting a diagnosis of cortical visual impairment can be important for getting necessary school services and getting the therapy that patients need. So I just wanted to give a little background on CVI and how we're going to evaluate for it in the clinic. So I think of cortical visual impairment as a visual processing problem. So we always say that getting a diagnosis of CVI does not mean that your patient is blind. It means that they're having trouble processing visual information from their environment. We know that sensory processing can be a problem in neurogenetic conditions, including SYNGAP1. We know that auditory processing can be a problem. So it makes sense that visual processing is also a problem. And we have found that cortical visual impairment is one of the leading causes of pediatric visual impairment in the US. And about 10% of children with developmental challenges have a diagnosis of CVI. Some symptoms of CVI include increased attention to bright lights. Children with CVI tend to focus on like bright windows, lights from above, and also certain colors. Red tends to be their favorite. So looking at red colors in their environment. They tend to have delayed visual responses, reduced fixing and tracking, may like to look a certain direction, but not other directions. And then some other hallmarks are that they use their peripheral vision to look at objects, because while our central vision is our best vision, patients with cortical visual impairment are having trouble processing their visual information overall. So their peripheral vision is not any worse or better, we think, than their central vision. So they're often going like this to reach for things, not really looking and reaching. They can have difficulty with changes in surfaces, so walking from carpet to tile, wood floor to carpet can be difficult, and tend to reach out with their foot to feel for the next step or to feel for the next surface, rather than actually taking time to look and then step. And a really important thing when it comes to school is that patients with cortical visual impairment have a huge difficulty with busy visual environments. So it's really important to simplify the visual environment, have a few choices that are either brightly illuminated or have high contrast, and not give them too much visual information. You can imagine that if you're having trouble processing your visual world, that you need just a few things there to be able to process that slowly. And so it's been something that we've focused on at our institution, is evaluating for CVI in the clinic. And so asking some visual screening questions, like, do you guys have concern about your patient's vision? How does your patient look at things? Is it out of the corner of their eye or with their central vision? Does the patient go downstairs and cross thresholds well? Or are they reaching out with their foot? Just some of those symptom questions that I was just talking about. And then as part of the severity assessment that I was just talking about, the CDKL5 clinical severity assessment, there's a whole visual domain that's helpful for assessing for CVI. So there's visual components of that scale, and you can get a score that ranges from 0 to 100, with 100 being the most severe impairment, that can also help us give a diagnosis of CVI. And I just give some examples of the visual items in this clinical severity assessment here. So we can see there's fixing and following. We do something called an optokinetic nystagmus reflex, which is where we see if the patient can track these bars we put in front of their eye, which is a natural kind of visual response, but often is either delayed or absent in cortical visual impairment. And then how the eyes are aligned and how the eyes are moving are all helpful things to know for CVI. A really important thing, though, is that while we evaluate for these things and we think it's important to make a diagnosis of CVI, it's also important to know that the structure of the eye is intact, So before we give a diagnosis of CVI, we need to make sure that the patient's been evaluated by an ophthalmologist and that the structure of the eye is intact, but the function is decreased due to cortical visual impairment. So we work with ophthalmologists to make sure that these kids have had an eye evaluation before we make a diagnosis of CVI. So those are a couple of the things that I'm planning on adding to measuring in the SYNGAP clinic, in addition to kind of all the different measures that we're planning as part of the natural history study. And I am just really excited that we're getting this clinic started at Colorado, and that we're going to be able to collaborate on the natural history study and give people the opportunity to come to another site if you're in, you know, a part of the Western US where it would be easier to make it here. And I put our nurse coordinator's information up here again, just so you guys can have it. Even though, you know, the August clinics are going to come and go pretty fast, we are starting a list for the clinics that are going to begin in January. So not a bad idea to reach out if you guys are interested in coming. And yeah, I'm happy to take any questions, or if Jillian has anything to add at this point, we can go from there.
Cool. Do you have anything, Jillian, you want to talk about at all, or?
Just one thing that Sam, actually one of our research physical therapists, was texting me during this that we should mention is that all of this data will be stored in an FDA compliant REDCap as well, so that this can be used for future clinical trials, which I think is an important point to make.
I was going to ask that. That was one of my questions, how you guys were like sharing data and everything. That's great. That's really good.
I think it's lucky that we've already done this with STX51. So we have previous kind of regulatory elements and data sharing elements that are set up there that we can add SYNGAP to, so that we're doing this all from, you know, good regulatory IRB perspective and data sharing agreement perspective, so that all this data can come to good use from a research perspective.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. I'm first, so I'm operations manager at SRF, and I live in Colorado. I'm so excited about this. I've been to the multidisciplinary clinic with my son, who's 14. It's really, really nice. Like Dr. McKee said, it is really nice. And I get nervous talking about it, but an anecdote that I had, the first time I took Will to this clinic, we saw another neurologist, but that's when I met Dr. Abbott. And Will is really strong, has very extreme behaviors. He's obsessed with staircases. And there's, of course, this huge door with a staircase. And Will ran off, and he's big. He's bigger than all of us combined. No, he's bigger at least than all of us for sure. And I'm like, oh my God. And I'm like nervous already meeting a new doctor and things. And then, oh my gosh, Dr. Abbott and the other doctor that was there caught him, and I'm like crying. I'm like, oh my God. And I felt it's so embarrassing for some reason. I know you guys see kids like this all the time, but just that I could not keep him in the room. But you guys were like totally fine with it and so cool, and like brought him back and like coaxed him in, which I could never do. And it meant a lot to me. And Dr. Abbott gave me a hug, and I'm like, thank you. It's really nice though. It's just all around perfect. So I think it's going to be really nice for the other kids, and the hospital's really nice. And I wanted to take him to CHOP and couldn't, you know, I can't get the kid on an airplane. I never have since he was a baby. So I'm so happy it's here. Wanted to say that. And then for SRF, we do have a travel assistance program. I want to make sure everybody know that. It was just, we've used it for the last year for CHOP to get patients there. And they just was approved by the board for another year, or for another, you know, amount. So if you need help, you can email me and I'll help you. We'll help you get set up with that. Okay, that was my main stuff. I don't see if anybody else has.
And I remember that day well, and it was
okay.
Meeting
Thank you.
Will was totally fine. We're used to that, so. Okay,
good. Yeah, I love the little play area you guys have is really nice too. It's awesome. It's so good. So there's one question, I think, from Sarah. Oh, so However, are you able to, I don't know if you just says, Sarah Driscoll says, welcome to the SRF family, Dr. Abbott. We're on the East Coast and planning to stick with CHOP due to location, but are we able to reach out to you about questions related to CVI?
Yeah, I'm typing in my email now.
Okay.
Happy to answer questions. It's just a clinical interest of mine, but certainly everyone at CHOP is aware of CVI and can make that diagnosis there as well. So I'm putting my email in.
Thank you. Okay.
And one new addition for people who've already come to the CHOP site is that we are in collaboration with Dr. Abbott. We are going to start doing the CSA as well for our children with SYNGAP. We've already been doing it for our STX BP1 patients. So we actually just started that this summer. So we will have that has some broad screening for CVI as well. So we will be doing that starting now.
Awesome. Hans, Dr. Schlecht, he's a dad, but I let him speak if you want to ask anything. Hans.
Yeah, can you guys hear me okay?
Kind of, yes.
A little bit.
Sorry, I'm driving right now, but thank you so much for the presentation. Going back to the data sharing, are there plans for publication, like a data cut after 1 year of 50 subjects, just to sort of get out into the open, a analyzed look at what a Syngapian, a population of Syngapians look like in a prospective manner?
I'm going to defer to Jillian if they have plans, because I know they've been at this for a year. Has it been a year already, Jillian?
Yeah, it's been a year already. And as of today, I'm pretty sure, like 99% sure the number is 76 unique patients with SYNGAP now that we've evaluated over the last year. And we've had, I can't remember the exact numbers, but several people have come back for come back for one follow-up visit. And we've had a couple come for 2 follow-up visits already. So like they were seen initially, they came for a 6-month and then came for a second 6-month follow-up. So I submitted an AES abstract on like the initial findings, and I'll present it at the SRF meeting as well. I'm planning to present that data then. And then, yes, we will start working on publication as well.
Yeah, and
Great,
my plan
thank you.
also, just from a data sharing perspective with the community, the plan is to do at least, twice a year check-ins or webinars with SRF to say, what are we seeing in the clinic? What kind of data do we think is going to come out of the clinic? And may do that quarterly or twice a year, depending on, how many patients we've seen and how much we have to share. And then ultimately the goal is always to publish the data. We want to get the data to you guys whenever we have kind of a cohesive group.
So the severity score, did you talk about that? I don't feel like I heard you say that in the presentation. Can you tell everybody?
So that's the CSA, the clinical severity assessment that we've expanded from CDKL5 to try to pilot it on other conditions. And we are planning to do it for SYNGAP, both here and at CHOP, like Jillian said.
That's gonna be good. Okay, let me go back to my other list. Sure.
Oh, and I think I'd gotten an email that people had a question about insurance. And we have worked with out-of-state Medicaid before. It just depends on your state and if we can get a contract. But Riley would be the first point person for that. And then we'll work through kind of whatever insurance questions we have and ultimately try to find a solution. I know we have had the most trouble with California out-of-state Medicaid, but have had success with other states outside of that.
Okay, that's good to know. All right.
I had a quick question about insurance. This is Olga. What about private insurance? out of network, I guess? Is that how that would work, or is it just strictly Medicaid?
I feel, don't quote me on this.
Mm.
Every insurance is a little bit different, but I feel that I haven't heard as many problems with private insurance on getting, telling them that this is the only clinic in this area and, getting coverage. It seems like out-of-state Medicaid's more of a problem than private
Yeah.
insurance. But certainly we kind of have to work through everything on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, that helps. And I had one other quick question while I'm on the CVI. We've had several ophthalmology appointments. We started out with strabismus, but that has never come up with any of, and this is of course at Texas Children's. So what type of reports is it just a regular pediatric ophthalmologist? You would look at their evaluation and go from there, or would you all start from scratch?
No, yeah, we would just want to make sure that you'd seen an ophthalmologist and that, a lot of kids have strabismus and CVI. We would just want to make sure that the overall structure of the eye was okay, that there was no problems with the retina. And that would allow us to do our evaluation and then make a diagnosis of CVI. So
okay. So most ophthalmologists they're able to identify it, is my question, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I will say that that's been somewhat of the problem, is that, ophthalmologists tend to think that CVI is a neurology problem, and neurologists tend to think that CVI is an ophthalmology problem. And we tried to bridge that gap and actually give a diagnosis.
Okay, that helps.
So, but it's always something you could bring up to an ophthalmologist and say, like, hey, what do you think about this? And it may cause them to do other evaluations.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much.
Of course.
I have a question, actually. I've gotten this a few times from a couple of families. Can they switch from CHOP to Colorado? Or what's the feeling on that? Like, will the data get messed up or anything? Or just for some that are closer?
Yeah, we absolutely want to make this convenient for families. And we're working together very closely. And that's part of why I wanted to be here for this webinar, to make sure everyone understands, we are one team, we are working together, we are going to share our data and collaborate. Obviously, there'll be some subtle differences in the specific assessments, but absolutely go where it is convenient for you to go.
Okay, that's great to know. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Hans, do you have another question, or he might be just having his hand raised. Okay. Okay. I don't know. Does anybody else have other questions? I'll check Facebook. Anybody have other questions? Please. I don't think so. Okay. Well, do you guys have anything else? Trying to think. Let me just go through and check here.
Lauren, I was going to ask just another question. This is Olga again. So for Colorado, you'll be opening up visits starting in January. And is that for a whole year, 6 months, or do we know at this point what?
Yeah, it should be for the whole year. But we may schedule January, February, March, and then open up April, May, June. So we kind of just have to see how recruitment goes. But the plan is to hold the clinic one half, 3 patients once a month.
Okay.
January.
And then is Philadelphia, are they continuing at the same time, on a parallel basis?
Yeah. We're not planning any major changes to our study. The one difference is that we're opening a second day for the week. Right now, our clinics are on Thursdays, but we're also going to have Friday appointments as well, starting in August of this year.
Okay, great. Thank you both so much.
Yeah.
Hey. My friend, he's back. Will's respite's leaving. It's perfect timing. Does anybody have any other questions, I guess, or anything to add? I'm really excited about it. I really am. So
yeah, we're excited about the collaboration and to get the clinic for Syngap started. I've been wanting to do this over the past year and just thrilled to, finally be getting it up and running. and appreciate everyone's patience in having the August clinics and then kind of restarting in January. But our nurse coordinator will be available in the interim if questions come up, and we'll be scheduling for the clinics that are starting in January.
Okay. Sit down.
I will.
Say hi. Say hello to everybody. Really nice. Okay. That's perfect. That's great. This is a lot for SYNGAP too. I mean, our disease is not very old yet, so it's pretty awesome that we're getting this. So, you know, so it's great. It's just awesome. I'm happy for us. I appreciate all this from everybody. Okay, I think we're gonna have to go.
Yeah,
Thank you,
sounds-
Lauren.
sorry.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you
Abbott.
guys
and
so
Dr.
much.
McKee.
Thank you, everyone. Looking forward to seeing everyone.
You too. Thanks for doing this. Okay, bye.